Is this like our 19th set? I forget which session this is. Okay. Bismillah. Welcome everyone to another session of the Lisan Lab, our semiotic laboratory. Always try and reinvent and reframe and renew my intentions or our intentions with these sessions, because it's a new kind of way, I think, to learn. I don't think actually it's a new way to learn. I think people are catching on to how powerful conversations are in terms of learning. Especially with like AI and chatbots and stuff like that. But it's the oldest tradition in the world, you could say, conversation. So today's session will be on القاب. So before I jump into anything, does anybody want to kick us off? Anybody have any thoughts that they want to share, or even just on? I'm going to start actually with just focusing on the sound a little bit, because I think that's really relevant here, especially in terms of these sessions and what they're about. Cool. So language as signal. That was kind of the headline that I gave myself for renewing the session intention or session idea. Thinking of language as everything from like the most basic vibrations to the grandest stories of the universe. That's kind of the scope of these sessions, I think, to put it in vague, abstract terms. But we look at radicals, the basic sounds, and then we try and move from there to the biggest stories or the biggest ideas in the world, which are man's fate, the fate of all things, that kind of idea. Semiotics is a term that's used for meaning making, or the study of meanings, how meanings are formed. But I've been also, like we mentioned last week, really loving the idea of morphology being like the winds of change or the winds of meaning, as kind of captured in the Quran, because Allah uses the same word or the same root to describe the movement of wind, as he does, or as is used in Arabic to describe morphology. So sarf is morphology, and as we said, tasrif al-riyah in the Quran is the movement of winds. Um, I mentioned in the chat also that some changes, some updates are happening with the MindRoots application. And one of the most exciting ones for me, but maybe not so exciting for anybody else or anybody who's trying to help, is the morphological data validation. So basically, I'm going through every single word in the lexicon, in Lane's lexicon, which is about 55,000 words or something like that, and tagging the morphological form. So there's nothing like this. There's nothing that exists like this anywhere, as far as I can tell. I've done a decent amount of research. There are some tools that can kind of do this sort of thing, but nothing very accurately. So it's a really kind of interesting experience going through all these different words and trying to tag them. It feels like reading the winds in a way, or reading the currents of meaning. Okay, so let's jump into Qabid. And with the point of these sessions, as I tried to articulate, as being a study of sound, a study of radical meaning, a study of sound, of meaning from its most basic elements to its most grandest elements. I feel like with this name in particular, Al-Qabid, we have a really interesting contrast in like signals. this idea actually came to me when I was driving the other day. There's a guy on a motorcycle, and he was just like weaving through traffic, and I felt this like I don't know if anybody could relate. If you like cars, you might relate, or if you can think back to when you were a kid and you were racing somebody, or like playing with kids, with friends, like racing, or even on bikes or something like that. So I feel like there's this like very innate human uh, how can I best phrase it? A sense, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. But it's like we have a sense for each other's senses, right? So like this guy's driving on the highway, weaving through cars, and I have this like urge for some reason to kind of go fast too, right? Just move, like race him in a kind of way, and it almost I wasn't really gonna race him. He's a motorcycle and he's weaving through traffic, but like, but the idea that like came to me was that like I felt that even though he couldn't see me, right? Even though we never made eye contact, or he has no idea who I am. I felt like he could almost sense that I wanted to race him, right? That I wanted to move fast, and then and he felt that, so he moved faster, right? And so there was this like kind of like strange primordial interaction that we as humans have with each other with sound and signals. I don't know if anyone's ever experienced this as well, but like oftentimes if you're driving on the highway and you just happen to turn your head and look at the car that's passing you by, whether it's on your right or left, you always find that they do it too, right? That like maybe it's just the motion of the car or something, but my gut tells me that something else is going on, that we can kind of sense each other um, in a way that is beyond perception. Yeah, and that's another core principle of these sessions and of my research, and I think any kind of research into the mind and language, is that perception is fundamentally limited. So that has a certain meaning, right? That itself, it tells us that the patterns that we come across in nature, really often they are the limits of our perception. So with qaf, um, with qabid, right, you have this qaf sound in the beginning. It's a sound that isn't really present. I don't think any other language has a sound like this. It's like, I think in Arabic too, it's the deepest sound that you can get. It's the most guttural, and it's very similar to orthographically. It's very similar to uh, another radical or another letter that is uh, starkly different. So the qaf, right, it looks like the fa, but the fa is more about speed. Fa is more about movement and quickness, right? You can kind of hear it in any language really, but maybe especially in Arabic, especially I get the sense of it with the word fana a lot, right? Fana has a sense of like fin, like we say finished in English, right? There's a sense of like or in the Quran, you say, "Kullu man alayha fan," right? Everyone will perish. Everyone who's on the face of the earth will be fan, perished. But qaf, right? Qaf is like the complete opposite in a way. Opposites. The word opposite is, I feel like, not great sometimes when we're talking about language, because yeah, there's no such thing as an opposite in a kind of way. Everything is just like the same. Everything is a mirror, right? It's an idea that we come across a lot. Or the fractal nature of the universe is another phrase I really like. Or the idea of folding and unfolding, or turning, as we find with the word qalb, the word for heart. So qaf and qabd, it has this really like strong, stable kind of sense, as contrasted to like fa, which is very associated with like movement and speed and stuff like that. So these are like a bit subjective, right? And the way I'm describing the sounds here is a bit also subjective and a bit arbitrary. But I think and that's the nature of these sessions and the nature of this kind of study that makes it a bit difficult, right? It's difficult to be empirical. It's difficult to be exact, because you're talking about things we're talking about the most elemental things in human nature, right? In existence. So that's a very lofty aim, and it can make things a bit challenging sometimes, and also a bit controversial and um, difficult to share and expose other people to. So, as always, feedback is very well welcomed and appreciated in any aspect of our sessions of the Mindress application. There are a few updates actually that I'll show in a bit if you didn't notice already. There's some UI changes here, a little bit easier to navigate, a little bit cleaner. Cool. So I think we can just jump into morphology real quick. Qabid is interesting because it doesn't appear in the Quran at all. It's also, I think, if we go back to the list, the start of names, we already did a few, I think, when we did al-Bari', right? Al-Khaliq, al-Bari', right? So we came across that agent noun, the basic agent noun, the non-intensive agent noun, fa'al, the basic doer noun in Arabic. And yeah, those names, Khaliq does have an intensive form, so Khalaq, but Bari' does not. We don't say al-Barra. That's not, I'm not even sure if that's a word actually. Or Barra is, but I don't think Barra is. So then, so we're coming into, I think, a series of names of God. We see here Al-Qabid, Al-Basit, Al-Basit, Al-Khafid, Al-Rafi'. So these are all names that are not intensive. And we'll see, I guess, in a little bit. There might be some websites that already have this information out there, but I want to add some statistical information to this list so we can see a little bit better what forms are present in the list, which forms are not. We've been dealing mostly with the intensive form, right? The fa'al form where you have that doubled middle letter. But now we're getting into a few that don't have that intensive form. They just have the general agent form. Labit. There is an intensive form of the verb, qabbada, I think, yeah. But there is no qabbad as far as I am aware. It's definitely not used to describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
It's there. Yeah, but it's there though. On
It
top
is? Do you
of
see it?
منقبض. Just right at the top. Right below مقبضة. قباض.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, but not used to describe Allah. And as we said, this name itself is not even in the Quran at all, and it only appears in the Quran. You can take a look here. In the verbal form, so at least in reference to Allah. So the famous phrase, I think, "Wallahu yaqbidu wa yabsutu," right? Allah, He withholds or restricts. Actually, colloquially, I'm not sure about other Arabs, but Egyptians use this verb for the meaning of arresting somebody. So, like when the police arrest someone, you would say "qabadu alayh," right? They arrested him. So it's always helpful for me, at least, to tie down abstract concepts and names of God or ideas like that to colloquial language. That always helps me a bit. So yeah, in the Quran we find this root about 9 times, always having the meaning of withholding. In the most basic sense, qabd. If we go back to the graph, qabd would be the most the basic infinitive. And we can say that everything, I think that's actually, we find that in the Quran, everything is in the qabd of Allah, right? Everything is in the grasp of Allah. وَالْأَرْضُ جَمِيعًا قَبْضَتُهُ. Right. So the earth in its entirety is. So the translation here is in his grip, but really it's like the wording is kind of
Yeah,
interesting.
it's a noun form, right? Yeah, I
Right.
thought it was
Yeah.
saying there's
Yeah.
no verb actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Proper is.
Yeah. The earth in its entirety is his grip. It's kind of the wording here. But Yom al Qiyamah. So maybe better to look at the entire context. Context is I'm not familiar with it. وما قدر الله حق قدره والأرض جميعا قبضته يوم القيامة والسماوات مطويات بيمينه سبحانه وتعالى عما يشركون. Subhanallah. So this ayah is describing um, the earth in its entirety is within as being his grip. He is, I guess the implication is within his grip, but the language is literally that the earth is his grip, and the heavens. وَالسَّمَاوَاتُ مَطْوِيَاتٌ بِيَمِينِهِ. That's a really interesting phrase, and the translation is not going to do too much justice to it, but not sure what multiyatun means here, but it's translated as will be folded in his right hand. So again, this idea of like folding, um, never leaving us. But yeah, interesting contrast here. The earth is described as being the grip of Allah, his qabd, and the skies as folding in his right hand. So I'm gonna have to think about that for the rest of the week. But yeah, interesting. Very interesting root, I think, in terms of its presence in the Quran or lack of presence in the Quran. The other place that we find this name of Allah is in a famous hadith, which I shared in the group earlier a couple of days ago, mostly about economics. So I won't read the hadith here, but basically explain the general idea is that I guess it was tough economic times, and I think it's a really beautiful hadith that really kind of captures Islam in a very unique way too. And basically, there are tough economic times, and people asked the Prophet ﷺ to fix the prices for them. Right, so literally they say "Sa'ir lana," right, like set prices for us. It's tough, right? Times are tough right now, and it's just kind of interesting, because it's in a way kind of a very human thing, right? Like, oh, you're our leader. We're having a tough time. Make things easier for us, right? So their intuition was like, he's the prophet of God, right? He can do whatever he wants. He has all the power, over the people or whatever it is. But the response of the Prophet ﷺ is like, no, that's not how this works, right? That's not how Islam works. That's not a good thing to do, right? To try and fix prices, and we know that now, obviously, of having studied human history and seen the effects that can have on people and markets, and that's a whole other topic. But the Prophet's response, alayhi salam, is "Inna Allah huwa al-musa'ir al-qabid al-basit al-raziq." So some people actually think that these four names are one name, similar to how we talked about al-Khaliq al-Bari al-Musawwir, right? So the creator, the evolver or originator, and the fashioner, right? Those three names appear in the Quran together, and some people kind of think that the way they all modify each other, um, like the preceding name modifying the last name. Some people think that they all have a kind of, like, they are really just one name, similar to like Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, right? We don't find Ar-Rahman or Rahim uh, alone, except in that one case for Surah Ar-Rahman. But rather they modify each other, right? They kind of describe each other. Allah is the most merciful of all time and space, Rahman, and then that is also modified with Rahim. Some people dispute this name. the name before Al-Qabid here, Al-Musa'ir. It's not in the list of 99 names as could be a mistake. I'm pretty sure it's not in the list. But literally, it comes from Si'r, which means price. So Musa'ir is that uh, causal or instrumental form of the doer or agent noun, meaning the one who sets the price. So Allah is the price setter, the withholder, the extender, and the provider. That's the four names translated in this hadith. Yeah, so very beautiful and unique hadith that kind of captures Islam in a lot of different aspects of Islam are captured in this one kind of idea here. The other thing I think that's interesting to point out here, and since we started doing this a bit by looking towards the next word, so like in our list, we were looking at alim, and then we talked a little bit about qabid, and I think that's important because I always think of Shakespeare when I think of this idea of looking forwards and backwards. That's in one of his famous soliloquies, but he describes man as, that's what makes him different from humans, from animals, right? We can look forward and backward. So we talked about alim, the concept of qabd, I think is really important. But even more important probably is bast, right? And qabd and bast to me are almost kind of like the yin and yang of Islam in a way. But they're often paired together, and they are, you could say, opposite meaning, I think. But I think also you can think of it as just, two sides of the same coin. Qabd is also generally used to describe the taking of souls, death. So I think Yasmin mentioned this in the chat about somebody that passed. I don't know much about this person, or I don't know anything about this person actually. Sorry, but that's qabd al-arwah, right? Or qabd al-ruh means the snatching or the grabbing or the seizing of souls. So that's another way that this root is often used. Al-Qabid, Al-Basit. And I think some people also think that these two names shouldn't really be separated. The idea of those four names being one name is definitely a minority opinion, but a little bit more common is the idea of Qabid and Basit being kind of one name, just like you have Al-Zahir wal-Batin as well, right? And some people think you can't really separate them. I did have something else. I'm slipping my mind here about Qabd. Sorry. Sorry, everyone. Just looking at my notes here. Yeah. Okay. So in regards to ilm and al-alim, I think qabd also, even though it's generally seen in a more superficial or more simple idea, sense or frame of God withholding, right? God taking. Yeah, God giveth and he taketh away, right? It's the meme phrase, or you hear often, right? But I think you can also think of al-qabid in a very jamali way, or in a very beautiful way, not just in a, jalali way or a majestic way or a fearful way. In that Allah's qabd, right? Allah's withholding of things adds to the beauty and diversity of our of existence. In that, um, for example, if we just look at like language, right? So, each of these sounds, right, each of these letters, each of these radicals, each of these vibrations, or frequencies are productive in different ways. So some are more productive than others. Ra, uh, as you might know, is probably the most productive sound in the Arabic language. I think Seen maybe after it as well. Um, uh, and I hope to be able to visualize this a little bit better in Mind Roots at some point. But Qaf, for example, doesn't really have as much of a distribution. Well, you can't really see that here. But even and roots as well, right? So some roots have many, many words, many, many derivations, and some don't, right? So some have much, much, much less. I think you can also think of it in terms of like, the diversity of human of life itself, right? Like flora and fauna and the diversity of our languages and the diversity of our appearances and in our cultures, right? Everything in life has its own kind of uniqueness, right? And that's because everything doesn't have that, like, sorry, I'm saying this poorly, but I think language is the best way to kind of describe it. Every language is unique in its own way. Every language has something to offer that another language doesn't have. And I think that's all part of the qabd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Relating it back to al-alim and al-ilm, Allah says, in the Quran that we have not been given much of knowledge, especially when it comes to the soul, right? Specifically, the soul is mentioned in the Quran as something that we have not been given much knowledge of. Allah has withheld that knowledge. And for me personally, ever since I think I was a kid, the idea of heaven was um, always curious and interesting and hopeful to me, because there was so much stuff I didn't understand, right? And I just, even though I didn't have much understanding of Islam or God or anything like that, I remember from a young age just having this like this certainty or this feeling that like all the stuff that I don't understand, I will understand at some point in the next life, not in this life, but like that knowledge exists somewhere, and if I'm good, if I make it to heaven, if I can meet God, then, then all the knowledge I don't understand, all these things in the world that seem to not make sense, God will make sense for me. There's one interesting story that one of my favorite sheikhs, Sheikh Mitwali Sharawi, famous Egyptian scholar, he uses uh, to show the qabd and the bust of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the story in Surah Al-Baqarah, I believe. It's towards the end, and it's the story. It's a strange story, especially if you read the wording in the Quran. It's a bit hard to follow, but it's about a man who was put to sleep for 100 years, and when he woke up, God tells him, how long did you sleep? Or God asks him, I think, how long did you sleep? I may be losing some parts of the story here, but the main idea is that um, he asks him to. God tells him, no, you slept for 100 years. Look at your food and your drink. Nothing happened to them. They stayed as they are, just like you did. So it's a bit of a contrast when you're reading it in the Quran, because God's saying you slept for 100 years, but then your food, like nothing happened to it, it didn't perish. But then he says, but look at your donkey, your ride, that is just bones. So the Sheikh is using this story to explain that the reason that it's worded this way and the reason that it's presented this way in the Quran is because God is trying to show us how his power is, right? Or how he's able to extend certain things, extend time for certain things, and then withhold time for certain things. So I thought that was an interesting point to bring up. Oh, Assalamu alaikum. We have a friend Ammar just joined. Um, so I think that's most of my note. There's something that's that's slipping my mind here, and maybe it'll come to me. But that's pretty much all the notes I have on Qabid here. Does anybody have any thoughts they'd like to share? Any questions? Any thoughts? It would be interesting if this is one of our shorter sessions because of the name Al-Qabid. So it would be fitting, and not a disappointment. We've spent a lot of time together. So, but there's something lingering in my mind it's just slipping my mind, and maybe it will come to me. Is anybody? Is there a hand raise or something? I can't.
Yes,
Oh,
I have
oh,
my hand raised.
yes,
So
please.
we also use it in Urdu for occupied. We use it actually in two ways. One of them is occupied as in a political military occupation. So Kashmir, my homeland, in it's called Makbuza Kashmir, meaning it's in the kabza, it's in the occupation of India. We don't use that
Right.
Makbuza sense. We don't use it as a descriptor for the Pakistani administered slash technically occupied part of Kashmir. But there is a sense of oppression attached to the word Makbuza, that description. So it's used only for the Indian occupied side of it. And the other word is constipation, kabd.
Oh, really?
I don't know. Is that used in Arabic for constipation as well? It's qad.
Yeah,
No,
it is.
actually.
Al-Mani, it is. It says
Oh, really? Oh.
imsak and qab. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I know imsak, but I don't know. I have never heard qabd for. It makes sense. Same idea, basically, right?
Yeah.
It says qabd al-batn أو الأمعاء. Qabd.
Mm,
And
yeah.
we
Yeah.
can think of it in terms of actually pregnancy, because sometimes the the fetus, the embryo, just it doesn't stay. It doesn't stay behind. So you need to have the strength to be able to keep it in the body until the gestation is over.
Oh, so qabd, you're saying in Urdu it's also used
Oh.
for pregnancy?
Not for pregnancy, but to be able to keep a pregnancy going until
Oh,
its limit.
interesting.
I think
To
she's pointing out that it's like a Jamali aspect. Like we need
the
that. It's
Jamali aspect,
something.
exactly. Yeah, that the baby, the baby is able to occupy the womb. The baby is able to be withheld in the womb for the time that it needs to be there. So a protective Jamali aspect of the word.
Yeah, I think qabd is one of the most tricky to kind of show the Jamali aspect or the beautiful aspect of it. But I think yeah, it is as you say, right? In that there is a beauty in the grasp of Allah, or in Allah keeping things away from us, or keeping certain things limited. Is that
Yeah,
maybe another way to think about it? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it's used for taking possession of. So if you've bought a house, you would say, have you received possession of the house? And the word in Urdu you would use would be kabd. Or we actually don't, in Urdu, we don't say the sound, we would say z. So have you taken kabza of the house? Have you already taken possession of the house? So it's also, again, which is attached to grasp, right? Have you already grasped
Yeah.
at the place or not?
Right. Yeah, makes sense. And that seems to also be a little bit present in Arabic with this form here for bartering. So qabada, the reciprocal form, or the fa'ala form.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that implication is there. And there is also maqbood, but we
But
use
both,
that, I
yeah.
think, for a little bit different than Urdu. We use it for like
Imprisoned prisoner. Somebody
uh,
was a prisoner.
I think it can be used that way, someone who's arrested, but I think it's also used to refer to somebody who was who passed away, who Allah took his soul, basically, or
Okay. Okay.
seized his soul.
Okay. Yeah,
It's
that could be another topic for one session. All the different words that we use for somebody who's passed away. Most of them are rooted in Arabic, and it's a wide range of words we use in Urdu. All of them,
Yeah.
most of them based in Arabic roots, Arabic words. To avoid saying the colloquial word, which is marna, but we would say intikal, we would say, right? Zanira and rehlat farma gaye. Even rehlat farma gaye. So somebody has gone on permanently on a journey or they have been transferred, intikal.
Oh wow. Yeah, intiqal is Arabic. We don't use that. The only ones I know are like marhum,
I
maqbool.
think
Marhum also,
sometimes
marhum as
people
well.
say like when they're announcing someone's passing, intaqala ila
Oh
rahmatillahi
yeah.
fulan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right. Yeah.
That's what we almost like intiqal is the most common one, like that person.
yeah. So
It's
intikal
like
is,
euphemisms basically. They're all Arabic euphemisms.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that would be a cool topic.
yeah.
I was just going to interject real quick that this discussion of qabd makes me think of the Latin root like for capture, right? Like or like capere means like to seize something, right? To grab something. So that sound symbolism because there's no P in Arabic, but the P and the B are kind of very similar. So capture. Even the word prince comes from princeps, like the first to take something, right? Princeps. So anyway, just thinking about those sound symbolism connections across the languages.
Yeah, that's really captured does sound like, I mean, the P and the B definitely fluctuate and flip throughout language. So it's very possible that capture is related to qabd in some way.
And building on what you were talking about earlier about how the earth is his grasp, it makes me think of the relation between grasp, grab, gravity, those kind of clusters of sounds and words also kind of like come to mind.
Yeah, I love me some false cognates. Yeah, people gets everybody riled up.
Everything that glitters is not gold, but
Yeah, exactly.
I'm also reminded just in terms of, what you speak, Omar, normally about like intuitive, or at least what seems intuitive, I guess,
Right.
or concrete versus abstract. So like in this case, this I've been reading it recently. وإن كنتم على سفر ولم تجدوا كاتبا فرهان مقبوضة. And I actually have no idea what that means. I read all the translations. Actually still don't know what it means exactly because I feel like it's a financial term. I don't know if it means like it says deposit in hand, but it's translated in hand. Literally, maqbuda is translated in hand. And this, I mean, the context is like financial in terms of like contracts, and the actual, more specifically, the context is when people were not a lot of people were writers, not writers like writers, but not a lot of people could write. So God is saying that it's ideal to have, to write it, to write down contracts. But then if you're on a journey and they don't find lam tajidu katiban, they don't find someone who can write, farihanum maqbuda, and there's differences. But anyway, so I'm not exactly sure what that means, but it's interesting that this is also a financial context, just like the hadith, right, that you said, because that was also like a marketplace context in terms of like price. And then the other thing, but yeah, so in terms of intuitive, or like what is concrete, I feel like this name reminds me of Malik, who's also someone who holds in his hand, and بيده الملك, right? So in so qabid I also feel is like it what's it called, alludes to the not metaphor but the image of a hand, of God's hand.
Right.
And just like Malik is like بيده الخير قل اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء. Okay, yeah, but it's just the image of the hand, because like someone who has a hand can hold and who has the power to hold.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think actually this reminds me. I think the best way to translate Rehan, well, I mean, I wouldn't say the best way, but the translation here is security deposit. So I think the idea is, it's yeah, I mean, a deposit or some amount of money or wealth that's held in, securely, right? I think that's the basic idea. But yeah, interesting. I always find technical language in Arabic to be very, very interesting. Like the way we say capitalism in Arabic, I always found interesting. We call it Ra's Mal, which literally means like the head of wealth or the head of money. Um, so yeah, technical or economic terms in the Quran too are also Rusu Malikum, I think, is also actually in the Quran. So it doesn't mean capitalism in that sense, but it just, I think it refers to capital wealth or um, I'm not sure exactly, but it has something to do with economics. But to your point, Zanira, yeah, Qabd is actually very similar to Al-Malik, same kind of idea of, or the base idea is similar because we say malaka, which means to like grasp something or to have a hold on it, or as we see here, grip, qabda, meaning like one's grip. So one of the features actually that I'm playing around with here is kind of what I'm calling like an etymological, um, there you go, an etymological kind of, so basically there's this gold line here. So it's kind of the idea is to link it to the main corpus item, the main um, entry in the text that we're looking at, but it's also to kind of just guide the person a little bit to like, okay, so we're looking at this root. This is the main idea that we're looking at, and what's the word that kind of ties everything together the most, right? So boom. So I've only done this for a couple of roots so far, but for Malika, or for Malik, right, we have the idea of Malaka, or to like to possess something. That's the base concept here. Like with Rahman, we had womb. Quds, I think this one is a mistake actually. I selected the noun when actually the verb actually is a little bit more clear, because it's the idea of like moving far away, and that's how we get the idea of holiness. So I'm trying to do that with all the roots here, and this is largely based on our sessions and the discussions that we have. So jazakumullah khair to everyone who's participated and who's participating in these sessions, because like I said, we're building something together here. Alhamdulillah. So yeah, this is kind of some of the idea. Like this one is one of my favorites because you're taking a very abstract concept like might or honor, yeah, and it's tied to something in Arabic that's very concrete and very intuitive. I hate that word now. But yeah, that's one of the features that I'm toying around with. There's also an advanced mode that I'm trying to toy around with a bit here as well, so that if you click on a root, you get some more options here, so you can get a little bit more information. These buttons don't all work
Sorry,
yet.
are you showing us? Are you trying to show us the app? Because I can't see the app.
Oh, sorry. Let me start all over again.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, so the feature I was trying to show was let me turn off the advanced mode here. But it's just that is etymon highlighting. So etymon is the root word of etymology. So and etymon is generally like the heart of meaning, right? So the feature that I'm trying to implement here is something in the graph that would showcase like what the heart of the meaning here is, or like what you can look at first, or what you should look at first to try and get a good picture of the root. So this yellow line kind of symbolizes like an etymonic pair, or an etymological pair that kind of showcases or illustrates or guides you through the semantic field, or the knowledge graph. So I've done these for most of the roots that we've come across so far, as I was saying.
Can I say something? It's a little bit
Yeah, sure.
sinister.
Sure.
But yeah, so if you just go back to Malik,
Yeah.
it was just so interesting because I was just reminded of something that's done in energy healing, which is, yeah, so you said possessor and owned, right?
Mm.
And these, like, because I'm thinking about what is the, like, the Jamali aspects of the name, Qabid. And sometimes, not sometimes, more often than you would expect. As energy healers, we deal with people whose bodies are possessed by spirits outside of themselves. And so this name, it's just so interesting because, like, the yellow line, whatever you said, Etamin link, whatever it is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just
It
the
stood
heart
out.
of beating is how I think of it, really. Kind of
Yeah,
trying to
so
heart of the field. Yeah.
the same thing, right? Like possessor. So one of the things is like Malik, because I've been thinking about like how to remove that. Like what, because sometimes some of the spirits are really adamant and they don't believe in the client's body. But anyway, so
Mhm.
I've been thinking about like who I should call on in terms, not obviously a god, but I meant like which name in terms of, right? But yeah, so possessor would be one, and one thing that I was reminded of was in the Quran Allah says قل اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء.
Mm.
So to remove that تنزع Allah منزع mulk from that being, but the other one is qabid, because we want God, because it's like, you know, it's almost like I'm being arrested. It's like the person's body is in the qabd of another spirit that is withholding them from accessing their real self. And it happens a lot with black magic. Not a lot, I think it's almost necessarily linked to that, at least in the cases that I've seen. But yeah, so it was really interesting because then it's like, whose hand? I feel like it also goes back to, like, again, Malik is really interesting because here I think one of the things that you had on the side was about slave, right? Yeah, the human owner of a slave. So there's this idea of slavery, and the words in Arabic for slave being linked to neck. Raqaba, tahriru raqaba, or anaq, I think anaq as well.
Mm.
Allahumma atiq riqabana minan nar. So it's like God is our slave, like we're the slaves and God is our malik, in that sense that our necks are in his hand. And that is actually one of the ways that possessing spirits access. I don't think they're one of, I think they are, is through the neck, because they say the spirit cord, the cord that connects our body to us, ruh, is on the neck, in the back of the neck. And so, yeah, so I was just thinking about, like, in terms of that qabid is the one that can actually, you know, that is the Jamali. It's actually not Jamali, but it's Jamali for the person that's, you know, suffering. But in terms of the, yeah, in terms of the transgressing spirit, we can call on qabid to, like, you know, to hold them, to, like, what's it called? Yeah, to
I see.
qabid.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
see.
And then because it's a very sort of, I don't want to say intimate, but it's a very, like, yeah, it is like physically, you know, it's like I mean, a lot of the work that I do, actually, primarily all of it has been online. So, like, for me to sit here and command a spirit to go out from a person's body, like, I can't actually, like, I'm not actually doing anything. But then it's like, you know, God, because it's very, like, in between. It's almost like a interspersed, right, like, phenomenon where body and spirit, and it's like, who can hold that? Nobody can hold that because that's so, like, inter I don't even know what the word is, but anyway, it's like interpenetrated almost into their body. But then al-qabid can hold that because he's holding everything. And yeah, so that's just what I thought of. And also, this other thing is about, even this thing about rihan maqbuda is linked to that, because a lot of times, like I said, black magic thing, like, there are deals that people have made with the devil, and to sell their souls or to sell someone else's soul, usually maybe someone in their descendants soul. That's what I've seen. Anyway, so then I think there was hadith where it said before going to bed, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say, Lama fukka rihani, fukka rihani. So yeah, like remove that, like what's it called? Almost like a deal to remove the shaitan. And because again, this one like specifically occurs again with the shaitan, because we're told that the shaitan runs like through our blood. And again, it's just like that, being interspersed, where you can't go inside of your blood and remove something, right? Like that's just, it feels like you don't have the power to do that. And before, when we were speaking about Samir as well as Alim as well as Ghaffar, we're speaking about like the waswas and all of that of the shaitan. Again, it feels like we don't have access to like make him stop, basically. But then, so yeah, I feel like that's the Jamali aspect of Qabid, because every single part of that, like your ears or your sadr where the waswas are at, or your blood where the shaitan apparently, flows through it, all of that is in the qabd of Allah. And like we are in the qabd of Allah. So that's really reassuring, because yeah, it doesn't sound like qabd is something you want to be in, right? but
Right. Yeah.
but maybe it is. And so the other two things that I saw, if you go to the corpus, it's just in the,
You
it
mean the
says,
Corpus Quran or?
yeah, corpus with qabd, qabd. So I was thinking about like this really reminds me, this name, I mean, not the name itself, but the instances in the Quran where it says, أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا إِلَى الطَّيْرِ فَوْقَهُمْ صَافَّاتٍ وَيَقْبِضْنَ, and then he
Mm,
says, مَا يَمْسِكُهُنَّ إِلَّا الرَّحْمَنِ. So
thanks, Rahman.
that, and then for me, like that is like this is one of the things that's like closest to my heart. And even when it comes to the names, like I'm more interested in the names of causation. And I feel like this is, and I think imsak and qabd, they're very close in meaning, right?
Yeah.
Like they're almost identical, I would say. Yeah, like they're almost synonymous. But they're both like holding and withholding, because Allah also talks about qabd in terms of, he doesn't say rizq, but he says like it's hinted at, like that money is something that Allah yaqbid wa yabsut, and then it's also like what's it called? Imsak is also rizq, in amsaka rizqa, right? So they both come under like rizq. So what's interesting here is again in terms of being held almost like in the hands of Allah, is the illusion of causation. Because Allah is saying, have they not looked at the birds above them? They open their wings, or they spread their wings, and then they fold them, I guess would be, yeah, but it also means like they contract their wings. It's a contraction physically. But what's interesting, again, so that's actually really Jamali too, right? That means you can't actually, like, you can't,
Yeah.
birds, you can't, as if we're flying. But a bird cannot fly unless it's both expanding and contracting its wings. So that is literally like taking you, literally, not us, but literally it's taking the bird to new heights, the expansion and the contraction. But what's really interesting for me is the ayah that comes after it, مَا يَمْسِكُهُنَّ إِلَّا الرَّحْمَنِ, nothing holds them except ar-Rahman. And in another place he says, مَا يَمْسِكُهُنَّ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. And so that's really interesting, because we think that, I mean, people say also, right, physics and stuff, buoyancy, air, and all of that. But God is saying nothing holds them except Allah and except Rahman. So, like, I love that ayah, because it's like, actually, it's not the wings that's holding the birds up. It's Allah that's holding the birds up, Ar-Rahman that's holding the birds up. And then the other one, if you go down where it says, ثُمَّ قَبَضْنَاهُ إِلَيْهِ قَبْضًا يَسِيرًا. And then if you go to the ayah before that, it says, أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى رَبِّكَ كَيْفَ مَدَّ الظِّلَّ وَلَوْ شَاءَ لَجَعَلَهُ سَاكِنًا ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَا الشَّمْسَ عَلَيْهِ دَلِيلًا. This is like the most, I think, clear proof of causation being an illusion. Because one of the things that we think right now, like if you're in any space where there's light, you will see shadow, right? And right now, like I'm seeing so many shadows, and we think, oh, light is what is causing the shadow. But Allah says, have you not considered your Lord? how he extends the shadow, and if he willed, he could have made it stationary. Then we make the sun for it an indication. So we think first comes sun, then comes sunlight, then comes shadow, and then the the shadow throughout the day extends or gets shorter, right? But Allah is saying actually, كيف مد الظل? Did you see how he, ربك, like your Lord, extended the shadow? And if he wanted, he could have made it stationary. So that means there's no necessary link of causation between the sun's movement and the shadow being extended or stationary. And then he says, ثم قبضناه إليه قبضا يسيرا. Then we hold it in hand for a brief grasp. And then the other translation says, then we take it to ourselves little by little, or he reduces it in gradual steps. So then again, this qabd is like, it's such an like intimate, what's it called? Manifestation of causation, because we think it's the sun and it's the angle of the light hitting the object that's causing the shadow. But God is saying, actually, I'm very directly extending the shadow. And if I didn't want to, if I wanted to, I could have made it stationary, sakina, not moving at all. But actually, I chose to do qabd and to extend it and to withdraw it. And then he uses the word thumma, which is like for, time. And then God made the sun like a proof to it. So like it's like later the sun was placed almost like the sun is created after the shadow, because in our minds that really doesn't make sense, right? Because it's like the effect being created before the cause. But then that just shows you there's no like causation. Like we projected that. God didn't say. God is saying that actually at first I made the shadow and then I made the sun. It's guide or dalil, whatever, like proof, I would say. And then ثم قبضناه. Again, the قبضناه is like قبضنا, right? Like we did it. Elena, that's so beautiful. It's like, oh, I'm actually the one that's doing that. The sun isn't doing that. So yeah, I love the lifting of the shadow of illusion, where Allah is showing He's directly causing a lot of things that we think are caused by external causes.
Yeah, mashallah, jazakallah khair for that. That's you reminded me of what I wanted to, what was slipping my mind. Yeah, that's really deep, I think, and difficult to articulate simply. I'm just going to read the ayahs again. ألم تر إلى ربك كيف مد الظل ولو شاء لجعلناه ساكنا ثم جعلنا الشمس عليه دليلا ثم قبضناه إلينا قبضا يسيرا. What's your question there?
It's not a question. I'm just saying that Allah is saying that He's the one that's extending the shade, and then the sun was created after the shadow was created, showing that the sun is not causing the shadow, but God is causing the shadow to be extended, and then He created the sun after creating the shadow. That God is the causer, basically.
Yeah, subhanAllah, that's very powerful. I have to really read this a few times and kind of meditate on it. The way I was thinking about it was with the ayah in Surah Al-Mulk that that I shared in the chat and that we mentioned. I think it's one of the I think it's exactly what you're saying in a different frame, maybe. The flight of birds. I think you said it verbatim pretty much. Like the bird can't fly if it doesn't do both, right? If it doesn't both extend its wings and contract them. So I feel like that kind of captures, similarly to these ayahs here, like the beauty and the majesty of this name, and this idea of withholding, right? That it's, I don't want to say a necessary evil, but like two sides of the same coin, right? In a lot of ways, right? Because it's our human tendency to kind of think that when God withholds, it's a bad thing, right? But but oftentimes when God extends, that could be dangerous for us too, or harmful for us too. So they're two sides of the same coin. as we often see with these names. And that ayah in particular, I'm still stuck on this ayah, or these two ayahs, because I feel like there's a lot to unpack here. But the ayahs with the ayahs describing the motion of birds actually is miraculous in its own linguistic kind of merit. Allah describes the gliding of birds as safat, using a noun, which by most interpretations reflects the flight of the bird in that moment, right? Because its body is almost completely static, right? It's just gliding. When its wings are extended and it's just flowing through the air. And in that one video, you can actually see how like the body of the bird is like almost completely still, and its head can kind of like move around. It's a bit strange when you look at it, actually. Yeah, exactly. Expansion and contraction are essential even just for bodily human movement. But yeah, I mean,
Isn't it also like, it's also like our, what's it called? Our muscles work
right.
like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and like bones and muscles, they work like that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a hard thing, I think, for humans to just grasp, right? That like the two sides of the same coin thing. But it's the Quran and the Arabic language are the best guides that we have, or the best reminders that we have to kind of I'm thinking of the hadith ajaban li amr al-mu'min, right? Strange is the affair of the believer. Something good happens to him, he's thankful to Allah, and if something bad happens, he's patient, and that benefits him too, right? So I mean, it's kind of the spirit of Islam, or the yin and yang of Islam. As I said earlier, or that's how it kind of feels sometimes. Maybe saying yin and yang is not really fair, but I think it's a similar concept that we find in different domains, different contexts. Qabd and bast as just being the fractal nature of the universe, the essence of Allah in an existence in many ways, right? The two sides of the jalal and the jamal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And
that reminded me of something. There's actually one of it's in the corpus. It says المنافقون والمنافقات بعضهم من بعض يأمرون بالمنكر وينهون عن المعروف ويقبضون أيديهم. Hypocrites, men and women, are of one another. They enjoin what is wrong and they forbid what is right, and they close or they grasp their hands. And so that reminded me that there's what's it called? There's this saying, or like hikam, I guess, about how about the hand again, because it's like, this thing about giving and withholding, right? Especially in terms of money or risk, exactly. Yeah, so in terms of those things, it's like someone, because a lot of times many people have this I don't know. I don't want to say self-righteous, but they think it is good to always give more than they receive, or like to not receive, right? Or that there's shame in receiving. So
yeah, it's a
I
very
read
Arab
that
kind of thing.
it said as that's what, because when you were speaking about yin and yang, it reminded me of this, that someone wrote a hand that is always open, that means it's always giving, is just as paralyzed as a hand that is always closed. And I just love that word. I mean, I don't love it, but I mean, I thought that word paralyzed was really interesting. That's exactly the opposite. I mean, that's exactly reflects what you were talking about, the importance of both yin and yang, or like the opening and the closing. It means you should be able to give and to receive. Otherwise, you're both equally imbalanced. Like, you might think that, one is more honorable, I guess. Okay, but also again, when we speak about bust, right? So it reminded me also about this ayah, about how we think, especially I guess Arabs, because there is this whole virtue of generosity, karam, right? About always giving, giving, giving. But Allah says here, and so we assume that bast is necessarily the good thing to do, than necessarily the jamali thing. But Allah says, ولا تجعل يدك مغلولة إلى عنقك ولا تبسطها كل البسط.
Yeah.
Don't hold your hand like to your neck, chain to your neck. ولا تبسطها كل بسط فتقعد ملوما محسورا. But also don't extend it completely so that you might become blamed and insolent. So like Allah is actually asking us to maintain the balance between bast and qabd in giving. Yeah.
MashaAllah, beautiful thoughts there. That's really very powerful. Yeah, we'll maybe look at bust a little bit more in depth next time. But yeah, that's a really great point. The other thing about the ayah with the birds is that the noun form is used for the gliding aspect, but the verb form is used for the flapping or the contracting aspect, which is often interpreted as like reflecting the nature of birds in flight in general, because as I said, when they're gliding, they're almost completely still, and they don't propel themselves or really move until they do qabd, right? Until they do the verb action and they contract their wings together. Yeah, the other interesting thing, I think the last note I really have, other than, I guess, there are a few words in the Quran and in Arabic for snatching or grabbing. Zanir mentioned a couple of them, naza, but that doesn't have a name that's associated with Allah. And then qabd, which does qabid, but then there's also batsh, in the batsh rabbika shadid, right? The batsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think that one has a little bit more of a violent connotation, or a little bit more of a harsher connotation. I think there was one other word that we mentioned, mesk and malak, right? Those are also very they're found in the Quran as describing like the grasp of Allah. So different grades.
Can I add something?
Of course.
Yeah, so the one very obvious one is, I think you've also been reciting this surah, but I've been reciting it a couple of times recently. كف أيديهم عنكم وكف أيديكم عنهم is to, I guess, withhold. But I thought that was very qabd related. Like I thought it's very synonymous to qabd, about where God is saying actually held them back from you. Like it's almost like hold me back, when people are fighting.
Right.
And they're
Yeah.
like, but yeah, it's like that. Like God is saying that, and it's a good, like it's Jamali, where Allah is saying, and also so the opposite of that is bas in here, where it's speaking about. I think I'm almost certain it's Habil and Qabil. لئن بسطت إلي يدك لتقتلني ما أنا بباسط يدي إليك لأقتلك. If you extend your hand to kill me, I'm not going to extend my hand to kill you. But yeah, it's, again, this is the Jalali bust about extending the hand to kill somebody. That's not a very nice bust. And then I was thinking also about, in terms of, I don't know necessarily if this is the same as kaf, but it's kind of, because this is the opposite that is used in opposition to bust. And I guess things are known by their opposites. So yaqdir is the opposite, right? And Allah قل إن ربي يبسط الرزق لمن يشاء ويقدر. And bast, and so if يقدر is the opposite of يبسط, and يقبض is also the opposite of يبسط, and يقدر and يبسط must have something. Sorry, قبض and qadr should have something to do with each other, which I guess one is more of like a measuring, but also like becoming constricted. I guess يقدر also has that sense. قادر also has a sense of becoming really full, almost, or like, yeah, constricted, I would say. So like sometimes I think one of the tafasir of Laylatul Qadr is that it's Qadr because all the angels descend. So it's like it's a really constricted time, because it's full. It's almost like there's no bus, there's no like space to roam, I guess. But yeah, it's like a qabd space again, but it's beautiful. It's a good Jamali qadr.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I can't think of any other synonyms, at least in the Quran, or for bust. So we've gone through a few for qabd.
What? But
Yeah.
what's is for bus, I think.
Oh yeah. What's yeah? Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we can probably map these out, and they seem to have like grades, right? So like the most intense to the most. Qadr, I think maybe is probably the least, right? Because it's more about like you said, measurement, right? So it's more like a measured kind of withholding. I'm thinking of the ayah in Surah Surah Al-Fajr, right, where Allah says, فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ, right? So Allah, it's usually translated as restricted or withheld, or it can even have the sense of determined here, right? And that's contrasted with I'm forgetting now, the ayah preceding it. فقدر عليه رزقه.
okay, but what's the sense of like what are you getting at? We can still
I'm just,
explain it.
no, I'm just trying to remember what the word is that's contrasted with qadr in that surah. I'll find it. But yeah, very interesting. The other thing I noticed that's kind of cool is that you see here bust is found 25 times, whereas the root for qabd is only found 9 times. So it'd be kind of interesting to see what the frequencies are for the synonyms that we've covered so far.
Sorry, I found one more synonym.
For what?
Qabd.
Oh.
But I mean, it's not exactly, but it's kind of more an antonym for bust. And it has to do with the image of hands, two hands for Allah's two hands. وقالت اليهود يد الله مغلولة غلت أيديهم ولعنوا بما قالوا بل يداه مبسوطتان ينفق كيف يشاء. The Jews say the hand of Allah is chained. Their hands are changed, and cursed are they for what they say. Rather, both his hands are extended, and he spends however he wills. I love that. I love the two hands. Because it removes the metaphor. Because I don't think the two like one, if it was a metaphor, then one hand was enough. But yeah, it just reminds you that it's not a metaphor.
Yeah. No, mashallah, that's beautiful. Yeah, the ayah in Surah Al-Fajr is فَمَا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ, right? So ibtila, right? Trial is actually the verbiage that's used for extension here, I guess you could say, right? Because the next ayah is where you have withholding, right? فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ, right? So in the first, just to gloss over the whole ayah again, فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَمَهُ. I guess you can also consider those as synonyms for extension there. فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَمَهُ, right? So he honored him and blessed him. That's the first ayah. Then the very next ayah is وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ. So both are considered tests or trials, but Allah contrasts qadr, that kind of withholding, with karam and ni'mah, right? Generosity, and ni'mah, which is like softness, soft blessing, and soft soft providence. Cool.
I guess. Do you think karam has any intuitive links to the hand, or like any body part? I mean, like, is there any concrete point of reference for that?
We can check. I don't. I feel like.
Oh, I feel like karam has something to do with grapes and wine. I think that's the point. It just suddenly came to me. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it has something to do with grapes and wine.
I think there is a physical something, but I don't remember.
Turmeric.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I saw that too. الكرم الصغير.
Kurkum. It's turmeric is
Oh,
kurkum.
kurkum. Oh, kurkum. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That probably should not be here. Or I don't know why it's there.
Yeah, can you click on Son of the Vine?
قطف
Yeah, see, I knew it had something to do with grapes.
ابن الكرم. ابن الكرم. Interesting. The قطف or the grape bunch. Interesting. I think there's something else too, but I'm not, or maybe I'm confusing it with something else. I can find that later and share it, inshallah.
We didn't get to Kareem yet, right?
No.
Yeah, I think it's the first. I mean, not Kareem, but Akram is the first name revealed. اقرأ وربك الأكرم.
Oh, right, yeah. Is that considered? I mean, I don't think that's in the list of 99 names, but Kareem should be. Akram, I don't know. Akram probably has the same status as like Musa'ir. Kareem.
No, but it's in the Quran. Musa'ir is in Hadith. Akram is in the Quran, but it's not in the list again, which raises the question:
Yeah.
why and who did it?
Well, I think in that case it would probably just because Akram there is used as like a superlative, right? It's meaning more Kareem. So that's probably the reasoning. But yeah, I think it's. I know some people, if you say Ramadan Kareem to them, they say Allah Akram or something like that. I don't know. Arabs have a fun way of like always like you always have to one up the other person when you're saying something about Allah or saying something nice.
Or giving du'as to someone else, you have to always be like, Yubarak, wafrah, etc., etc. And just keep it going always. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite is when they fight to pay the bill. That's always the the cliche, like Arab kind of like, they can get very violent and aggressive when someone.
They want to be Akram
Yeah, exactly.
from the other person.
Yeah, which pointing, to what you were saying earlier about, having balance is an interesting point. It reminded me of this thing I heard actually once about, it's not a hadith, but I think maybe it's like a scholar or something like that. Somebody asked him, like, how do I know if I'm of the people of the dunya or of the people of the akhirah? And he said, like, well, if somebody comes to you, do you get excited about somebody giving you something, or do you get more excited about you wanting to give? So if it's the latter, then it's not a hadith, it's something that I heard somewhere. But I think I like Zanir's point about there being balance, because there is a kind of grace and beauty and mercy in being able to receive somebody, right? Being able to hold space, as we say in the modern world, and allow somebody to express themselves and feel safe and then receive that. So that's a beautiful point that you made. Yeah, the only point I have left, I think, is just the idea of separation, which is like a recurring theme that I think we come across in deep studies of language. I think I mentioned before that if you look at like the base set of sounds or sound clusters in Arabic, which are just like, if you take every letter, all 28 letters, and you combine them with each other, you get about 700 possible pairs. And some of those or most of those are valid in Arabic, and a lot of them have to do with the idea of separating. I think we can kind of think of qabd as a kind of separating, and we also talk about the Quran as being furqan, right, as being the criterion, right, or that which separates. So just a reminder, I guess, that that's kind of one of the most fundamental concepts in or ideas or aspects of reality, you can kind of say, right? I think it points again to like the fractal nature of the universe, or the qalb of everything, really, not just of the human being, but the qalb in the sense of vibration, in the sense of folding and flipping of everything in existence, right? Everything is vibrations, everything is waves and sound.
Sorry, can I add something about what you just said?
Yeah, I had some more thoughts on separation there, but maybe you can help me. I'm a little off today, I guess.
I need to. No, me too. I don't actually have as much, but what you said is kind of the opposite of what we studied because you were not paying attention in Fasl Nuh clearly. But anyway, in Fasl Nuh it says that Quran actually is the opposite of Furqan, like literally. Quran means that which gathers, and Furqan means obviously that which separates. And every single wahi or like book before Quran was Furqan, and it necessarily like separated like God's tashbih and tanzih. And so no prophet was able to carry. We spoke about this as well, about how difficult it was for Rasulullah Aziz. It was actually for Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to receive the wahi in his body, how difficult, how heavy it was.
Right.
And so nobody else was able to carry Quran except Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So that's why Quran is in one way it's مصدق لما بين يديه, but so it like confirms everything, including the Furqan, and one of its names is Furqan, but it is in one way fundamentally different in that it gathers the opposites and gathers things and brings together. And one of the examples that Dr. Faris spoke about was about it's primarily based because it's Fasl. So it's primarily based on Nuh al-Islam's calling his qawm. And he says, إني دعوتهم ليلا ونهارا أسررت لهم. Sorry, astaghfirullah. I don't remember. But anyway, so he says that he called them Isra with Asrar, like Sirran and Jihara.
Yeah.
And so then he says, like, so he's basically contrasting. It's a very Furqani discourse. And then he says, again, everything he says is very Furqani discourse. So it's like, وَجَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ وَجَعَلَ الْقَمَرَ نُورًا وَجَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ سِرَاجًا. And so it's like, contrast, and even especially the contrast of Layl and Nahar. And so Dr. Faris says that's the Furqani way that Nuh al-Islam was embodying. But then Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he comes with this, which is called Quran, which is the gathering. And in that, we have words like, which are actually not necessarily, because Layl and Nahar are like polar opposites almost, right? Whereas in the Quran, we have like Wadduha and Wal Fajr, which are like and Wal Asr as well. It's like the times of combining. So those are the things mentioned in the Quran, because the Quran is actually a gathering. It's not a Furqan. But that was just one instance. But yeah, and also he says in Fasl Nuh, the Sheikh Al-Akbar says, والفرقان والقرآن يتضمن الفرقان ولكن الفرقان لا يتضمن القرآن. If that makes sense, then that's what he said. Otherwise, he didn't say that. But anyway, he says, because I'm just like trying to remember what he said off the top of my head, and I don't even know that much Arabic. But anyway, yeah, he says that Quran encompasses the Furqan, and Furqan does not encompass the Quran. So even in the Quran, if there is Furqani narratives or discourse, then it still like gathers. It's still a bringing together. And I actually noticed, like, when God is talking about the sun and the moon, a lot of times it's like in the Quran, right? Because obviously we're reading the Quran, we're not reading, I don't know what Nuh al-Islam brought, like what his book is called. But But yeah, we're reading the Quran. So it's like, وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا. So it's like even the ha is referring back to the shams. And so it's like a joining, it's not like a contrast, like, whereas the way that he was saying it. Anyway, that was just at this point about Furqan and Quran being that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam joined, and he himself, I think one of his names is also Jamia. In the Dalal al-Khairat, one of the names of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is Jamia.
Yeah.
And he's not, he's not meant to be a separator. But yeah, so this other instance I was reminded of from the corpus. من ذا الذي يقرض الله قرضا حسنا فيضاعفه له أضعافا كثيرة والله يقبض ويبسط وإليه ترجعون. Who is it that will give Allah a loan, a goodly loan, a beautiful loan, so that he may multiply it for him many times over? And it is Allah who withholds and grants abundance, and to him you will be returned. And this reminded me of a hadith where Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, again, this is something about everything is not what it seems. Like for me, that's the lesson in this.
Yeah.
Because Allah is saying, because it looks like when you give someone a loan, your money is reduced. Like you have less money than you had before. But Allah is saying, who's going to give me a loan so I can increase it many, many times? Adaf kathira. And so
Right.
that's kind of counterintuitive in a way, right? But then Allah is saying, but guess what? The reason why is because Wallahu yaqbidu wa yabsut. Because God can expand, and God does expand and withhold. And so I thought that was really beautiful, and it reminded me of the hadith where Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that charity does not decrease wealth. And within this, again, that's something that seems very counterintuitive. And because it looks like if you give your money, that means you have less money now. But God is saying, actually, that's not. Again, it also goes back to causation, right? Because it looks like by giving money away, God is saying something very counterintuitive, that you will have more money. And then that's what Rasulullah is saying. By giving money, you will not have less money. And it sounds like it doesn't even make sense. But then that means that it's actually not the money that is doing, like that is the abundance. And the other one is also, Wallahu yurbi sadaqat. I think in the same context in Surah Baqarah, Allah, when he's talking about a riba. Oh, wow, subhanAllah. Maybe there's like a little pun in there. And Allah says, because it looks like interest increases money. But Allah is saying, actually, no. If you do interest, then Allah and His Prophet are at war with you.
Right.
And Allah is actually, and if you give sadaqah, Allah grows the sadaqah. Again, it's so counterintuitive. Like, it's literally saying that by giving away money, you will have more money. And by saying that by having more money, you will have less money. Like, by keeping money, you will have less money. But at the same time, it is something, I think it's like a principle about, like, almost like the golden principle. Which is, wow, it just escaped my mind. But yeah, it's like, the golden principle, like wish, desire for others, or like wish for others what you do unto others, what you want others to do unto you. So it's
Right.
like when we do unto others sadaqah, which is a good thing, then God does unto us more sadaqah, like adafan kathira. And so it's like what goes around comes around. So there's like a deep wisdom in there. But at the same time, God is saying that God is showing us, because of like that it's actually a really counterintuitive thing. Like you can't actually see it, because it appears like if I'm going to give a bunch of money away, then I will literally have less number of money in my bank account. But then I think that points to qabid and basit, that actually it's not the money, but it's the qabid and the basit that are who are the names that are manifesting the wealth or the poverty even. I just said like one thing 5 different ways. I don't know why I did that, but yeah.
No worries. Yeah, I think the point I was trying to make about separation is kind of related to what you were saying, and that Allah talks about qabd in different frames or different ways. Right? We gave the example of the bird in flight, and in the example that you mentioned right here, I think the context was who will give Allah a goodly loan. But in this case, Wallahu yaqbid wa yabsut. So he describes the withholding first, instead of saying instead of talking about the bust, or the extension, first. Whereas in other places in the Quran, it's the opposite. So I think the example is not here. What am I thinking of? Inna Allah yabsutu rizqa liman yasha wa yaqbid. I don't see that here. Am I making that up?
No, that's يقدر. I don't think that's in that context. There's قبض. There's يقدر.
Oh, it's yaqdir. It's not yaqbid. Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, same idea, right? That qabd is second there, or withholding is second there, whereas bust comes first. So I just think it's kind of interesting how it's framed differently, and I think that lends to the idea of it being like two sides of the same coin. Yeah, we all love the bust, right? We all love for Allah to extend, His mercy and His generosity towards us, but we also have to accept that Allah withholds from us as well. And in some contexts, Allah kind of like mentions in passing how he withholds, whereas and then emphasizes how he extends. Whereas in other places in the Quran, they're kind of that framing is changed a little bit. Allah will mention first how he withholds, and then mention how he extends. And you kind of, like in the example that you gave, they're almost, there isn't, they aren't emphasized. They almost have equal emphasis in this ayah, whereas in other ayahs, maybe withholding is more emphasized, and extension is less emphasized. Which reminded me, something else that you said reminded me of something else. This is kind of unrelated, but I remember we were talking a lot in a couple sessions ago about like metaphysics of the heart, and how we have some unfortunate language in the modern day of like brokenhearted and stuff like that. And it made me think of a phrase that I keep hearing a lot lately is about locking in. You got to lock in, to mean like focus. And I just thought that was interesting, and I was curious how you felt about it, Zinir, as it being like, is it a real thing? Can we actually lock in? It reminds me of the ayah also in the Quran, right, where Allah says, are there locks on their hearts? Yeah, but yeah,
I
guess
hate it. I feel like,
yeah.
I don't know why. It's just something about, I don't know, like, oh, locked in. Well, let me just, I don't know what it actually means. Sometimes it means like
I think
really
it's more
committed,
focus.
right?
Yeah,
just to
Like, yeah, I'm
focus.
so
yeah,
serious.
focus. Yeah. It's interesting where these like metaphorical things come from. I always like one of the basic things I always kind of found interesting was like how in English we say somebody's cool, right? Like you're very cool, if you're,
Mm.
but we also say like nowadays it's more common now in more modern times, but we say like hot as well. So English has like both kind of
Oh, bad.
dynamic.
What about bad? Bad means good.
Yeah, bad or bad can
Like,
be good. Yeah. Whereas like in
like that's
colloquial
so
Arabic,
bad. Like you're so bad. That means you're actually really cool. I don't even know
yeah,
how they made.
yeah.
Michael Jackson.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, and then, yeah, I mean, there's mostly music probably. That's probably where that comes from, musical pop culture, Western pop culture. But it kind of contrasts with some languages. I don't know about other languages, but like, for example, if you say cool, someone's cool or cold, that kind of has so cool has a positive connotation, but if someone's cold, then that's a negative connotation. And in Arabic, or at least colloquial Egyptian, we would say somebody is like cold, or cool even, to mean like they're kind of boring, or they're kind of just like, not a lot of life in them. And then we also do
Oh yeah, we say the same in Urdu as well. Like
oh, really?
thanda hona, which means just like to be almost like unmoved, indifferent.
Right, yeah. And then we'll use like warm up the same way we use in English. Like, oh, I need to warm up, like before I can get started or really get into something. So yeah, just I guess the idea came to me from like how qabd seems to fit into that, into the, it seems to fit
Oh my
very
gosh, you know
neatly.
what? SubhanAllah, something, I don't know, I don't know if it's related, but he said qab. And literally at the moment I was thinking of liver, which is kabad in Arabic, I think also. And oh,
Just
very close.
FYI, just synchronicity. I just literally finished eating lunch. We just had chicken livers and stuff over here. That's funny as heck. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
No, see, that's
That's
what I was talking about
insane.
with the racing in the beginning of the session. That like there's, something happens with signals and perceptions beyond our perception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's in Punjabi, I don't actually speak fully Punjabi, but there's just like a bunch of Punjabi. Like Punjabi is like seen as like this funny language, and like I mean that's just how they portray it in Bollywood movies and stuff. So they'll like if there's like a comical character, sometimes they'll speak Punjabi in a movie that's not otherwise Punjabi. So like a lot of people who speak Urdu will know some like lines and stuff. But one of these lines that my friend says is like "Kaleje vich thand pe gayi," which means like my liver is cooled. Like yeah, basically. I know it doesn't make
Mhm.
any sense, but it means like I'm at peace now, kind of, or like, yeah, and it means like it's like a relief. Yeah, it's an expression of relief, to be cooled down, I guess. But yeah, I just thought it was insane that that has to do with the liver. I don't know why liver would. Oh,
Reminds me
actually, I don't know why I said that.
the coolness of the eye. Also,
Yeah.
Yeah, and also actually the liver is actually what's it called in Chinese medicine connected to anger, which is connected to fire. So I guess it makes everything. Yes, it's just yeah, everything's connected. And in لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد, right?
Yeah, covered. Yeah. So completely different letters. Only the ba is the same, but
But the
but
points of articulation are very very close.
yeah.
They're actually the same except for like emphasis.
Well, kaf and qa are actually very far apart. Right, qaf is very
I
low.
mean,
Yeah. No, I
but
mean,
they're like the same sound, like pretty
yeah, yeah.
much, except for like yeah.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Um, I
And
mean,
dal and ba are the exact same place of articulation except for emphasis.
yeah. Dad is more heavy. Um, I just had another thought that slipped my mind, but
But I feel like that is also that statement, خلقنا الإنسان في كبد, is also a manifestation of qabd, right? It's not a good thing. Like God is not saying that it's saying that He's created in difficulty.
right, yeah,
And He's created in like, and that word is very close. I thought, yeah, it's so interesting. That's oh wait, do you want to look at anagrams? What is that?
oh,
I forgot the name, mashallah.
yeah, anagrams, yeah. The point about kibd is interesting. I think in Urdu, you guys say something similar to Arabs. My mom would always say this phrase. Actually, it's like you're a piece of my liver. Right, is the literal translation, and it just means
Yeah, we do say that. Yeah,
yeah,
that you are my liver.
yeah. Right. And like I think even physiologically, the liver is like it does like some of the most of the a lot of work in the body in order to keep it like healthy. It undergoes a lot of stress. I think is how one doctor
Oh.
put it. Yeah, it can handle a lot of stress, and that's why when your liver goes bad,
Oh
like
yeah, and it detoxes as well, right? Like that's it kind of
yeah,
yeah, basically like removing like alcohol and stuff like that. I mean like detoxing is a function of the liver. And so what you said about like stress is really interesting because then it sounds like that's what God is saying that we created human being in a state of stress.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea. Yeah, that's definitely a valid translation. Yeah, we can look at the anagrams. Yeah,
I feel like they don't exist.
I
That's just
would
my
be
intuitive
yeah
feeling.
yeah I wouldn't be surprised either actually, because they're just two heavy letters, in the root. Oh, okay, so there you go. So we only have qabd and qadb. which let's see what this is about. Oh, a rod or cutting off. Okay, interesting. Yeah. So the idea of separation again. In Qab. I think I mentioned this last time, but there's actually even some dialects. So this might be why we have an anagram here is because some dialects actually they flip the last two letters um, uh, and it's normal for them.
Yeah, I feel like because Petra mentioned chicken. I feel like someone does that with the judge. Who does it? I've heard people say something like jig.
It's
And
an
I've
old
heard zawaj and zawaz for sure. I think among my Sudanese friends.
Zoj and Joes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Egyptians also say Josie. Yeah. Oh, so maybe it's the front two that get flipped too.
Yeah, Egyptians they use the
Gozi, right? They say Gozi.
Joes, but
Yeah.
in Sudan for the chicken, yeah, we say jidad instead of
Oh.
dajaj.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. See,
Wow, subhanAllah.
because I knew it. It's because I have a lot of Sudanese friends. But yeah, there's I don't know if you guys watched this one kid. His name is Bahar. He's so cute.
I think
It's just
I
like the
have seen this kid. Yeah.
funniest, right? Oh my gosh. So basically he comes and like they're just like Khaliji, right? And so he's first of all he's really pissed at his dad all the time. And so he comes to there's so many videos of him that's like so funny. But yeah, in this one his dad is like handing out to the kids like passports, or like he has a passport, and then he he goes, but how do you want, like, this is my Jawaz, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
when you grow up you're gonna have a Jawaz too.
Yeah, I saw
And he
that.
goes like, "Zawaj allow me? You're gonna marry?" He thinks he's saying I'm gonna get married,
On
and because Jawaz and
over.
Zawaj, so then he gets so angry. Oh my god, he gets so worked up, and he's like 5 years old or something. He's like, "Zawaj allow me? Zawaj
Yeah.
allow me?" And he's really pissed. And then he's like, "No way, you're gonna marry another woman after." And he's like, "Please calm down."
Yeah, that's
And he's
funny.
ready to fight him physically.
Yeah,
It's so
man.
interesting. Like, yeah.
Yeah, subhanAllah. Yeah, inshallah, I think I'm a little off today because I've just been doing a lot of coding, so my head is in the clouds. But a lot of these ideas that we're talking about, separation and union and being able to see those relationships at a high level in language is kind of what I'm trying to map and be able to show in the app. So you should be able to click on a root and see some of these things, like some of the basic sound clusters, like what are some, we can kind of already see it like in Corpus Quran, for example. Like if you click on Qaf, you can see like in the Quran we have 5 roots that start with qab, right? So to get a gloss of like all of the meanings in those 5 roots will be kind of interesting, and then also the second half of the root as well. So in the works, inshallah. And then hopefully some more information on the async style meaning, because I think it would just be good. I mean, I really like these sessions as well, but I think if we did like voice notes and it was asynchronous, I think we could get a lot of different perspectives. But we'll see, inshallah. And unless there's any more thoughts anybody wants to share, I think it would be kind of cool if we had a short
Actually,
session.
I just have a really quick question. This is for the Arabic speakers here. So, this is something that I've kind of been wondering, but I haven't really had the opportunity or just the clarity to ask it. But when we talk about Quran and Furqan and the idea of separation, that's the word that I keep hearing used for Furqan.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that really is that the meaning, and is there a distinction between separation and distinguishing, right? Like those are two different things. Like unifying something, like unification and unity are kind of like similar concepts, but they're not exactly the same. Just like distinguishing and separating are similar concepts, but not exactly the same thing. I wonder if there's a shade of meaning there that I'm not understanding because I don't know Arabic. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Something that I've kind of struggled with a bit because, like I said, you often find very simple words in Arabic have the meaning of just to cut, right? And that's a very common idea.
Yeah.
You also have ideas of like bringing together, but the idea of cutting is very basic. But then you also have these roots and these ideas that are it's not clear if separation is the main idea, and it almost seems like union and separation are also like, I mean, two sides of the same coin. I keep saying that phrase, but like the same thing in a way, right? Like with some concepts, the idea of union and separation being separate is less clear. Faraqa, yeah, I mean, I think there's a distinction between like separating and distinguishing, but I think
Like you can't separate light from darkness. You can distinguish light from darkness.
right, yeah. It reminds me of like how Allah says He created night and day in the Quran, but He placed light and darkness, right? So light and darkness are in some senses just figments of our limited perception, right? Like that's kind of where my brain goes when I try to make sense of that. The only thing that I think of a lot of time when we talk about Furqan is one of the nicknames of the Umar Umar radiallahu anhu, the Sahabi. He was also known as Al-Faruq because he was so tough, like he was just like, I often try and put myself in the shoes of the Sahaba or the four Sahaba sometimes. Like I remember a couple of months ago, I was like on a subway, and there was like a very unfortunately homeless man who was, in the middle of a crowded train, sleeping on like 5 chairs, smelling very bad. And I'm just like, I mean, I just think of Omar, like how would Omar handle it? Because my name is Omar. So, but then I also think of the other Sahaba, like how would they handle it? Like if like the Prophet ﷺ, maybe he would actually approach him, right? Whereas Omar would be like, would kick him out of the train or something like that. Or maybe Ali would just, stay silent and calm. Huge tangent from your point, but it's just kind of thinking out loud there.
Yeah.
Can I respond? But Petro, I want to know like what's I mean, I have like a response in linguistics terms, but I want to know, what do you mean by we can't separate light from darkness? Because in one way, like light is actually a name of Allah. Nur is a name of Allah. Allahu nur as-samawati wal ard. And Allah is not darkness.
Right.
So it is separated, but in another way, I kind of get what you mean. But I was just wondering if you could elaborate that we can
I guess
distinguish light from darkness. Yeah.
I'm thinking about like just I suppose in the phenomenal world, when you look at light and darkness, there's always the barrier between them is there's a gradation, right? So I think that's what I'm thinking of, like in existence. Anyway, this is an important point that for example, like Goethe and some of these like the whole idea of Goethean science. We were mentioning Goethe last week.
Yeah.
The idea of thinking about wholes and wholeness is like part of what that whole Goethean science is about. And this idea of distinguishing without separating is a key concept in the discourse of like wholeness and parts and wholes and things like that. So that's why I was wondering about the meaning of Furqan and whether it does have a very particular like cutting and separating meaning, or whether there's a kind of a distinguishing aspect, or whether those are interchangeable. So that was my question about that.
I believe they are very interchangeable.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with I think the key to make that understanding, the holistic understanding, and for both, is that the Furqan is encompassed within the Quran.
Mm.
So how I think about it, and I love to simplify things for myself, for my own sake. But with Furqan, if we start from like the meaning and the root, Faraqa, it means to separate something, right? From like but with the form Furqan, it's more like you add dimensions, that it's about making distinctions. because it's more like dissecting something without
Yeah.
taking that out of the
Removing it from the
the-
wholeness.
yes.
Yeah.
So with the Furqan, and one of the meaning that the Quran is making the clear distinction between what's right and what's wrong.
Mhm.
And that's one of the main and classic meaning for
Mhm.
Furqan. But it's encompassed within the Quran as a whole.
Mhm.
And I think even with the Qaf, the letter, when it comes in the beginning, because it's related to great energy. So when it comes in the beginning of a word, it dedicate the direction being to distill something down, taking like, and that's like with the Quran, it's like encompassing everything
Mhm.
without losing any of the essence of anything. It's more of encompassing everything with the essence. And with the Furqan, when the Qaf it's at the end, it's more of expansion of the energy
Mhm.
versus distilling it down. And I think we are going into a full circle, because one of my favorite ayat is the ayah we talked about earlier with the shadow. And I think there is, and right now we got back into the difference between light and darkness. But in the Quran, the Allah mentions the night before the day.
Mhm.
In the same time, Allah mentioned the sun before the moon. So it's always a layl wa nahar, and then a shamsu wal qamar. So the my understanding and how I was taught this, that Allah created darkness, or Allah created night. So it's different than saying creating darkness. He created night. It's the medium of the fabric of the universe, is the night. And even now, when we try to imagine the universe or even observing the universe, it's all night, and we still have the sun in the middle of that night, but it's not changing the fact it's surrounded by night.
Right. That goes back to like the ancient mythologies too, like the ancient like Orphic cosmology of like night was created and then later these other things were created. Mhm.
Yes,
Interesting.
but in a way that so we have this understanding that life itself is light, but in the same time the night is life, but the light, but the in the form that is not, I wouldn't say it would be accurate to say it's not activated, but it's not an it's at the basic, it's not static, but what's the word I'm trying to use here? And you guys can help me with that. Because I study all of this in Arabic, so translating sometimes it's
You can say it in
very
Arabic.
tricky.
Yeah,
Very
say
tricky.
it in Arabic, yeah.
So
You mean
ال,
قرار?
ال, no, so the concept itself, that Allah created night first, and then the day is an activation of part of the spectrum of that night to transform it into something else. And that's why I'm trying to circle back to the shadow, because I think that the whole my understanding of that with the shadow, it's about the kathafa in Arabic, which is the
Distant.
kathafa,
You said
yeah,
Masa.
the density of something.
كثافة, not مسافة. I always
كثافة.
heard
No, no.
مسافة.
Ka,
Yeah.
كثافة. Yeah, density, yeah.
kathafa, so the density of something. So shadow itself is created, and with this beautiful ayah, the shadow is a reflection of the density of other things. But it's the shadow itself is created. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala limited the shadow in a way that we see it as a reflection of something else. And that's the point you guys were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So with the spirits, I'm very sorry that I missed the first half an hour. So I don't know if you guys with the Al-Qabid, I'm trying to connect everything. So if I'm not making sense or jumping,
No, feel free.
just let me know. So with the Al-Qabid, one of the classic meanings, the first meaning that a lot of scholars start with is Qabidul Arwah. So it's Al-Qabd starts from the spiritual, the level of the Ar-Ruh. And then it has all this layers to it. Qabidul Qulub, Qabidul Rizq, all of it. It's how I think about it. It's the duality between al-jamal wal jalal can be like reflected beautifully on comparing al-qabid wal basit. But with the scholars, they always tie it together, where it can be like I love when scholars they study it separately, qabid and al-basit, because they're not necessarily exactly like opposite. But they very complementary to each other when it comes to understand that concept. Al-qabd wal-bast. So qabd, the classic meaning with the ruh, starts with the ruh, which is death. So Allah al-qabd is the ultimate controller of that fact of like death, capturing a soul, maintaining the soul. And how I'm trying to connect it with the shadow is the ethereal nature of the soul and all the living things on a spiritual level. We can't even comprehend how everything is connected and interacting to each other. But Allah qabid in a way that He controlled that interaction between that and on that ethereal level. Like my soul and someone else's souls, or all of our souls in this planet, they are interacting. They are very entwined. Like on a spiritual level, how can we make that distinction that my soul is not getting into your soul and your soul is not mixing up with the tree, which is a different level of soul, but or life. But that's one of the main thing, from my understanding, for the qabd, is Allah putting all these limits that makes that autonomy for things on a spiritual level. I don't know if that I'm making sense here or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough idea to kind of explain, and that's why I lean on these like phrases a lot, like two sides of the same coin, or the fractal unfolding nature of the universe. I think, yeah, there's a difference between separation and distinction, but maybe there isn't. Maybe there is no separation, right? Maybe nothing is separated in another frame, right?
Right.
And I think that's kind of like what I think that idea is also in Furqan, right? Because like you can even say furqa or fir'a, as the Egyptians would say, meaning a group, right? So it's so in that sense, like you I mean, when you divide, you are in a sense still putting things together, right? Because like if you divide, like, you know, those who go to hell and those who go to heaven, there's still union there, right? Because you're putting all the people who are going to heaven in one place, and they're being unified there. So yeah, it's a difficult point to kind of, and I think this is why Ibn Arabi says that, like, at least in my understanding of him, that like only God exists, everything else is just noise,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the same idea, and that's also the main idea with the app, right? Like this, like a root is not like is not or words are not like separate things, right? They're all just different shades or different angles of a much broader idea, and I think that's also what's happening with qabd and bust, right? Like, or I'm also thinking of like medical terms of systole and diastole. I forget the terms, but like when you take blood pressure, right, you have the two numbers, right?
Mhm.
Systolic and
Systolic.
diastolic, yeah.
Yes, systolic and diastolic, right? So like, and we also mentioned like just human movement itself. Like you have to extend and contract your muscles at the same time in order to move. Yeah, I mean,
And even spiritually, like al-qabd wal-bast, both of them are a spiritual status. It's or a station. So with the people seeking the nearness to Allah, how it's explained, because part of it is rizq and having like the means in life, but it's about the status of the heart. So with the qabd versus bust, being in qabd, you are forced to go inward, and with the bust, you are forced, or you are very gravitated towards the external interactions with life. So with like the scholars and awliya, there's this understanding that the people, when they reach a high level of enlightenment, they will prefer qabd over bust.
mm,
And how they describe it in the teachings, that in the time of qabd, of course, the understanding that the duality and the dynamic between qabd and bast, and you have to go through that beautiful circular motion between qabd and bast, but they prefer the qabd more, in a way that with the qabd you have one thing to do, and is to be patient, and that you look inward and you be patient, and that's like being in rida and nafs mutma'inna. You are in that tranquility, right? um, with the bust, Allah is opening all these different opportunities for you to do things. So now you have two responsibilities: to be doing good with all these opportunities and navigating all these different situations, and to be grateful for it. So it's two things. You are doing two things, but they prefer to do one thing, because that's they are more focused doing one thing to get even nearer to Allah. So the al-arifin billah, the people who know Allah, the and awliya, they prefer the qabd, because they recognize the jamal, the beauty embedded in that majesty, in that jalal. So
yeah,
it's
like,
more like being introverted. You are
mm,
forced to be like looking inward,
yeah,
and that's the qabd as an abstract concept. But with the tying it to the classic meaning of the highest level of qabd is qabidul arwah, and like the one who puts limits and distinctions between different things that they are so intertwined and working together at the same time, which in other methodologies can be more chaotic scene explaining that, but in Islam, our understanding is the most beautiful, everything happening at the same time. It's not chaotic.
Yeah,
It's
that's a beautiful point, mashallah. I think Zainir was
Add
saying
something?
something like this before. The idea of like qabd almost as being kind of like a guidance in a way, right? Like the path is restricted for you, but it's showing you, right? It's like it's guiding you in a way. I think that's kind of what you were saying a little bit too, Zainir.
I mean, no, but if you wanna credit me for that, I'm fine with it. I don't remember saying that.
I feel like I got that sense when you're talking about shadows and stuff, more abstractly maybe, but yeah.
But no, I'm glad. I'm glad that, I mean, that's what, if that's what it opened up for you. But you know, Petro, when you spoke about light and shadow and separation, something clicked in my head from like literally, I don't know, more than 10 years ago when I was in a class when one of my professors was obsessed with etymology. And I thought immediately of this one word and I couldn't remember it for the life of me. And then I had to Google a bunch of etymologies and I finally found it. The word is penumbra. And so penumbra means almost shadow. And so if you look anywhere around, you know, any object that is throwing a shadow, if you look at the shadow, right, the place where the shadow is falling, and then if you look at the place where there's no shadow, you'll find like there's an in-between space where the shadow kind of fades out, or you can say the light maybe fades in. So it's like an in-between space. And so that's called the penumbra, where it's like an almost shadow. I sent a picture in the group. But I thought that was really interesting because it kind of shows that there's no white and black or full separation. Because we think of
It's like
light
a
and shadow
barzakh,
as
isn't it?
yeah, like a liminal space, like a barzakh. And then, but it's so interesting because then again, there is supposed to be separation, but it's just that God never placed, like, you know, like almost like a stark, like what we say in English, a stark contrast. But there's no stark contrasts. But there are like opposites, there are polar opposites, but I feel like there's always like a barzakh. And it reminded me of something in the Quran, and there's so many instances of this in Surah Fatir, where it says وما يستوي البحران هذا عذب فرات سائغ شرابه وهذا ملح أجاج. The two bahar, the two seas, they are not equal. This one is sweet and cool, and it's a pleasure to drink it, and this one is salty. And so that is one separation. Here it doesn't say that there's a barzakh, but in other places we know that Allah says that there's a barzakh in between those specific kind of bahrain, right? And then he says later on, وَمَا يَسْتَوِي الْأَعْمَى وَالْبَصِيرُ وَلَا الظُّلُمَاتُ وَلَا النُّورُ وَلَا الظِّلُّ وَلَا الْحُرُورُ وَمَا يَسْتَوِي الْأَحْيَاءُ وَلَا الْأَمْوَاتُ. He says, and the blind person and the seeing person are not equal, and the darkness says, plural darknesses, and light are not equal. And I don't know what harur is actually, but it seems to be the opposite of dhil, which is, I think, shadow. And
Harur
then
is like being in, it's the sun, being exposed to the sun,
right, so it is the opposite of
like
shade. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Close.
So the shade and being exposed to the sun are not equal. And it's so crazy because these are literally things that we were talking about in وَمَا يَسْتَوِي الْأَحْيَاءُ وَلَا الْأَمْوَاتُ, and the living person and the dead person are not equal. But all of these instances, right, when I look at them, I feel like there's an in-between space. Because if, you know, there are people, and I only recently found this out, I guess, because more of like disability awareness and stuff like that there are people who are legally blind, but they're not fully blind. And so they can sort of see things. Like a lot of people are blind, but they're not like
Yeah, it's about the perception of light. Some people are legally
yeah.
blind; they can see light, and but they can't see, but they can perceive if there's a
Right.
light
So
or
I was
not.
thinking about it in terms of like farq and what Petra was asking about, like distinguishing versus separating. So if you were to put people into two groups, seeing like sighted people and blind people, those would be two groups. but then there's like an intermediate space where there are people that are like sort of in the spectrum, right? And then wala dhulumat wala nur, again, that's the penumbra. There's a space between the shadow and the light where it's like neither light nor shadow. And then ahya wal amwat as well. Like, people, this has become really a hot topic, almost like in bioethics, about like what does it mean to be dead, brain dead, versus, because before it was like cardiac, like the heart was the focus about for determining whether a person is dead or not. But then we have ventilators and stuff, so it's like, are people that are brain dead? So it's like, even there's a space between being alive and being dead, which is like, we have like dead, we separate the dead from the living, right? Like we say, like, I mean, we put them in two different categories, but at the same time, there's something in between. Like, there's like, what's it called? Sakarat al-maut. I think the like when a person is passing away, when the qabd of the ruh is happening. But at the same time, there's stages almost that we cannot determine as dead or alive. But I don't know, like, so it's like, even the things that we can distinguish, there's some cases where they're indistinguishable. And that's really interesting, because I feel like that points to like a reality which a lot of mystics point to, is like that separation does not exist. And we can never truly be separated from, first of all, we can never be separated from Allah. That's a very obvious one. But I mean, a lot of times our nafs deludes us into thinking that we are separated from Allah. But then, like, we can never be separated from each other. Like, it is physically, like, energetically, it is impossible for me to be separated from my environment, to be separated from other human beings, to be separated from the web of life. But we separate ourselves through language, we separate ourselves, right? Like, I mean, the work that I used to do, at least academically, it was about animals. The word animal, right? That it's a word of separation created by human beings. And so in animal advocacy, we don't say animal, we say non-human animal, because in the Quran, Allah does not create the separation between animals and human beings. There's no word in the Quran which includes all non-human animals but excludes human beings. So there's words, for example, namal, or like, there's baqara, right? So that's like a species, one specific species that includes only that species. But then there's no word which includes every being that we call animal, but it doesn't include us. There's no such word exists in the Quran.
Right.
The
Yeah.
word that exists is like dabba, which is beings that move, and that includes human beings and animals and jinn. So then it's like, even the word bi'a, I guess, environment. There's no such word in the Quran where Allah speaks about the environment to the exclusion of the human being. Allah says khalqullah, the creation of Allah. Like, it's a very inclusive Qur'ani language. And the language we use is so Furqani. It's like, oh, environmental protection. What environment? You are part of the environment. Like, you are here because of the environment. So it's just like, our worldview reflects in the language of separation that we use. And I feel like even these examples that Allah is saying, these are not equal. Like, the dead is not equal to the living. The salty water is not equal to the sweet water, fresh water. And then, like, the seeing person is not equal to the blind person. And yet, they're actually not like polar opposites. They're actually degrees of separation, or degrees of like their spectrum, right? So yeah, I guess it's like this thing about distinguishing versus completely separating. I guess we can never do that. We can never completely separate. And I think this is so interesting because, again, there's two terms. So one is barzakh, which is supposed to be like بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان. Neither of them transgresses the barzakh. So that's more of like a separation coding, I guess, but framing. But then there's Musa alayhi salam meeting Khidr, where it's not a separation, it's the union of two types of ilm. And so that happens near the Majma' al-Bahrain, which is the Jama', right? Which is the Jami', which is the opposite of separation. So like those two oceans, they actually meet and they become one. So that's so interesting. Again, it's like Furqan and Quran. And then, but Farq actually, in here, when I was looking at here, one of the tafsir, here it says, this is also an ayah from the Quran. مثل الفريقين كالأعمى والأصم والبصير والسميع هل يستويان مثلا? That the example of the two fariq, again, that's the same root as farq, the two groups, like Omar said, like that it is in itself, there's a sense of joining and union within the separation because you're grouped together with the group, right? It's like Yeah, I guess it's like a sociology thing as well. Like when you otherize people, when you say but you're actually trying to like, like in group, out group kind of thing. But yeah, it's like the example Allah is giving is the blind person and the deaf person versus the seeing person and the hearing person. Are they equal? And it says in the tafsir that there is a farq between them, like there is separation, there's a difference between them. And I mean, that's what God is saying, that like there are things, because this is the thing, by the way, because the New Age spirituality discourse is very focused on this thing, right? Like we're all one. And this came up a lot at the beginning of the genocide, because they were like, we cannot separate ourselves, like everything is one, we're all one. But then at the same time, some people are committing dhulm and some people are not committing dhulm. And there is actually separation. So like there is actually like, distinguishing, like you need to be able to distinguish. And you can't just be like, no, we're all one, like which we are all one and we are interconnected. But at the same time, there is blind and there's light and there's shadow. Also, Petro, you asked about like distinguishing versus like separating. And so this is from Surah Baqarah. وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ. So this is like talking about a type of magic that the shayateen taught the people during Sulaiman alayhi salam's time. And so in here, the farq is, it's definitely a farq of separation. It definitely means separation. فَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مِنْهُمَا مَا يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ. So they taught people that which would yufarriq, separate between a man and his wife.
Mhm.
So this is a type of magic that was in Sulaiman alayhi salam's time, which is different from the type of magic which was Musa alayhi salam's time, which was just a magic of illusion, where they سحروا أعين الناس, they did something on the eyes, like it was an illusion. But here, it definitely means like creating a separation, which in terms of like where separation is the opposite of union, even like romantic union. So yeah, it definitely does mean separation. But also I think sometimes about like the ayah where it says تلك الرسل, or it says آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله, right?
Yeah.
I just wonder sometimes about like what does that even mean, because they are, in one way, the prophets, they are separate human beings. They are separate messages, they are separate manifestations of God's names. Like Musa alayhi salam is not the manifestation that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is. But then Allah says that la nufarriqu. So I don't know which one it even means. Like
But
it kind of
I
doesn't make sense.
I would say that because it's all about the form. So the root faraka, it means to separate something. But in that form, furqan, that's very unique to Quran. And it's about separating things without taking it out of the holiness. So it's about a vertical growth of an idea. Like the Quran is the source to be able to do that. It's to make that distinction. So it's about distinction more than separation. The root faraka, yeah, it means to separate something from another thing. But with the form furqan, it's and Umar, you are the expert with the forms. So the furqan is very unique
I
to
don't
the
know about that.
Quran in a way that it's the wisdom to take something and dive deeper or build up that vertical growth to something in particular. So that's in the Quran, but it's all encompassed within the Quran. That's the Furqan part, is making these distinctions. So that's my understanding. I don't know if that's Petro, if that's
I think Homa had a thought. Do you want to expand on?
Yeah, I just was thinking about this idea of separation. So the tafarruqa, the criterion of farq that we employ in and of itself ties the two tafriq together. So when we in literary analysis we say not to do a simplified binary dichotomization, because we are still then captured by by the criterion. So even say black and white, and then yet if you're differentiating between a black um, chair and white piece of chalk, that color in itself, the black and whiteness, the oppositeness of the color, binds them together, because there is some table in our mind where they would be put across two lines. The criterion in and of itself, because the binds together. So if somebody is so intent on um, not doing activity A, not doing activity A all the time, to be separate from that activity, the fact that that obsessive thinking ties him, and he or she is the opposite of that activity, he's still tied to that. To be actually truly independent of that would mean to not be concerned with that activity at all. And I'm not sure whether I'm making sense here or not.
You lost me a little bit, but I think I
I
tried.
can explain. I
I,
understand.
I
So
think it
essentially, I
makes
think
perfect
the first,
sense to me.
Oh, okay. Then it's
yeah,
me.
I feel like the first thing is about comparison, right? Like you need to have at least something in common to be able to even
Something that
compare.
you're comparing, right?
Yeah,
Whether it's the fact of having a color, or the
yeah. But
fact
then
that
she's saying
you're thinking of an
that is
opposite
actually the
side.
unifying thing.
Yeah. And when we paint or we sketch, we actually um, rub with our fingers the boundary to make it quote unquote more real.
Mm,
Because in reality, and we use it in computer science, Omar, you would like the font of certain of the fonts are more amenable to the human eye, human vision, when they are slightly fuzzy around the edges. If they're too crisp, it hurts the eyes, because it then encapsulates that very dry, distinct, clear, sharp edge between two things, whereas we don't perceive reality that way, and we don't perceive it because reality is not that way, which is captured by the penumbra, but which is also captured by our, I guess, energies, our auras. When we see someone, there's a little mixing. We are going a little bit into the atmosphere around us, and the atmosphere is entering us. So the edges are never crisp
yeah.
unless it's a man-made, and even man-made, they're never crisp. That imperfection is its perfection.
You know,
The
that's reminding me of like phonetics, right? So when you do phonetic, like we think about phonemes and we think about phones as like distinct sounds. But when you sit and you listen to whatever we're speaking, for example, me speaking right now, and you look at the graph, there's no way to separate where one sound begins and the other ends. And
Yeah.
so, like literally, like when I'm speaking, like the vowels are blending into the consonants and the next consonant, and the next sound, right? So it's
Hmm.
like there's always blending, there's always jama. And
Hmm.
so, literally, if actually we stopped, and even like between words, there's no gap. Like these are almost like they don't even exist, and our mind projects that, like based on like it's almost like the phonemes or the separation. They only exist in our mind. So it's like
Hmm.
yeah, they actually do only exist in our mind. Because even I'm thinking about because I write in cursive. And even when I'm writing the letters, like there's no separation between the letters. They just blend into one another. And yet a person can read it and know that, this is an R and this is an A and this is an S, right? But how do they know if the letters are supposed to be like individual and separate? And how do we know if the phoneme is supposed to be different from the and like they're two distinct sounds? Oh, subhanAllah, actually, once I remember I attended a conference where they found that it is around the age of 3 to 4 months that children develop an understanding of what phonemes are like. What are phonemes in their language? Like what sounds are
What are
significant
separate words?
not words but sounds. So, for
yeah,
example,
Sounds.
in
yeah.
Urdu, what sounds have like different meaning. If we replace one sound with another, the meaning of the word will change. So they're different. That differs according to language. So for example, in Urdu, if you say pal versus if you say pal, pa and pa are two different sounds. They're phonemes. And so pal means moment and pal means fruit. But if you say that, first of all, the difference is not that stark in English, but it's the aspiration of the pa is just it's a matter of emphasis, or it's a matter of, like, if you say pen, if you just say it with it's slightly aspirated. But if you say spot, you don't say aspirated. But if you were to say spot, nobody's going to think you said something wrong. It's going to sound a bit weird, but it's not going to change the meaning. So it's not, because those two are not different phonemes in English. And it is at the age of 3 to 4 months that babies, like English speaking babies, are able to differentiate, oh, this is actually a difference that is irrelevant in my language. So they stop almost picking up on it. And like English speaking babies will actually pick up on it and be like, oh, these two are different sounds. So like that is, I guess, a furqan that God placed in our mind, I guess, the language acquisition device. SubhanAllah. Language is like so insane. And even like intonation is one of them, right? Like, because that's something that the babies starting to pick up from the womb. And they understand the intonation. So if you say something to them that is really nice, but you say it in a really angry tone, they're going to probably start crying because they could hear their tones. So yeah, I was thinking about words as well, because, but I guess mostly sounds, because sound, I guess, in one way, it's the most measurable thing that exists of a language, right? Like you can actually record it, and you can, what's it called, put it on a graph, and you can measure the frequency of the hertz and everything. This is actually what really blew my mind and like brought me to linguistics, from like to converted me, because I was actually doing biology at university. And then I took an introduction to language course. In one of the courses, it showed that the E vowel, right? Like, which is I think almost basic vowel. And like that is just, I would say probably most languages have the E vowel. But they found that when you see the E vowel pronounced, like, on a graph, and the frequency of it is of me pronouncing E as an Urdu speaking, like voice, my first language being Urdu. If I pronounce it in Urdu, the E is going to be slightly different from a native English speaker pronouncing it in English. And so, but the difference is so, so tiny. It is so tiny that it is almost impossible for us to like even pick it up on the graph. It's very tiny. Like we can pick it up, but it's very, like, it's a minute difference. But human beings or like even babies, right? Like an English speaking baby and an Urdu speaking baby. Like if, let's say, someone like me, whose first language is not English, pronouncing the speaking in English and saying the eval in English, someone who is a native English speaker will be able to pick up on that minute difference, which is difficult to even pick up on a graph, but their ears will pick it up and do the furqan, I guess, and they'll know that this person is not a native English speaker. And the same was like E in German versus E in French. So I was just like, subhanAllah, like, how did God place that? And not just that, but what blew my mind completely was the fact that babies can hear the sound, because we had to sit in front of we had to sit in the lisan lab, in the language lab, and actually look at all the hertz, and like, measure all the frequencies of the vowels. And it's so difficult to do. And I realized that babies, they will not only pick up the exact frequency that the parent is producing the E sound at, but they will then translate that to articulating it with their mouth at the same place, right? So that it sounds exactly like the English E and doesn't sound like a German mom's speaking E. I was like, that is insane. Like, how are we able to translate that, and how are we even able to pick that up? But yes, subhanAllah.
Oh wow, so many thoughts there. It reminds me of this page in the Mind Roots thing, which I want to expand eventually, because as I mentioned before, you can map the three basic vowels in language, a, e, and u, to low, mid, and high frequency ranges. But you can also map the entire, as Zanir was saying, you can do formant analysis of all of the sounds in language, and they all kind of fit into, they all can kind of fall into these different tiers, kind of like the way octaves in music work. Being a lover of poetry, I've tried to think about these things and simplify them as much as possible. And when I came up with this app, the idea that I was playing with for a while is the idea of roots and fruits, roots and shoots and fruits. So I was leaning on the rhyme there, but like, I remember kind of sitting in my cousin's backyard, and he's got a very nice backyard with lots of different fruit trees and stuff like that. So I had, the luxury of being able to wake up and just step outside in the backyard and pick fruit off a tree to eat, and that's a great blessing, alhamdulillah. But I started to think about, like, well, what is the difference between a root and a fruit? What is the difference between a seed and a shoot and the fruit that comes out? It's just perception, right? And I typed this in the chat when Zanir was talking, because it kind of came to me. But like, separation really to me is an artifact of perception, right? It's a residual effect or a side effect of perception, because perception is limited. So really, there is no difference between a fruit and the root or the shoots that that connect them. It's just our perception, right? It's just our limited perception. But that's not to say, it's not to like lean too much into the whole like modern day new age like spiritualism of like, oh, everything is one, everything is it's just to emphasize the limited nature of perception, and then also to emphasize the beauty of life and diversity, and the beauty of that limited perception, right? The beauty of the fact that Allah doesn't let us see everything, right? Like, if God wanted to, he could have just kept us all in heaven, right? We wouldn't have to struggle. We wouldn't have to go through separation and distinguishing things and shades of meaning and shades of color. We wouldn't have to go through the process. We would just get the result and the effect. But then we would be at a loss, right? We would not have experienced the beauty and majesty of effort and the reward that results from that. And that's also why I kind of picked this picture, which I don't remember where I found, but as kind of just the homepage or the logo for Mind Roots. The other thing that I just remembered as well is there's another feature that I added here, where, as you know, if you click on a word, you can get the entry from Lane's lexicon. But I've also added the ability to get the entries for the roots. So the roots don't have any entries. Like, there's no, there's the one book by Ibn Faris where I think he writes a little bit about each root, which I'd like to import and index into the app at some point. But the articles that were, or the glosses and the notes that we've been coming up with through the AI and through some of my own writing, that's going to be eventually added to the app for each of the entries that we go through. That's also why I want to try and do async meetings and stuff, so we can cover more ground. But yeah, so if you click on Rahim here, which is the root for Rahman Rahim, this is the only entry that I've added so far. So this is just something that I wrote a long time ago about Rahman and this app and stuff like that. But what I wanted to point to was this hadith, which I added here. And this hadith is describing the relationship, or the etymology actually, of womb, Rahim, and Ar-Rahman. And the wording, I only discovered this after the fact, after I came up with the idea of like the expanded the nodes expanding into this kind of like blooming flower sort of thing. But the wording in the hadith is actually really, really interesting, because the word that's used is, ignore the Google translation here, that's not correct, shujna. So shujna is literally, let me just read the whole hadith here. Ar-Rahman yarhamuhum, Ar-Rahman ارحموا من في الأرض يرحمكم من في السماء الرحم شجنة من الرحمن. Right, so Ar-Rahim, the womb, is a shujna of Ar-Rahman, and literally that's translated as like a branchlet of grapes, right? Not just like a branch, or like a stem or a shoot or something like that, but literally like a branchlet, like a bunch of grapes coming off a vine, which is very similar to the visualization that I ended up on here again. So yeah, it's a beautiful idea. It's one that's, I think in English in modern times we kind of allude to it a little bit, or the phrase that's coming to mind is like the ups and downs of life, right? Like that's kind of like how some modern New Age or maybe poetic ideas have framed it. Of course, nowhere near as rich and as expansive and discerning as qabd and bast, right, in Islam and in the Quran. But it's a similar idea, right? There's no difference between roots and fruits. Next time you eat a fruit, just the seeds are actually in the fruit, right? Like when we eat fruits, like the seeds are actually in there. The next generation of life is in captured inside the present generation.
So the bunch of grapes is very poetic and very visual, because inside the grape, each grape is the seed
Right.
for future trees.
Yeah.
So you can think of them as little wombs carrying the entire tree inside themselves.
Yeah. Another note you might find interesting, Homa, from a computer science perspective. So the graph database is really powerful for
Yeah.
being able
Like
to
a
access.
grape form.
Yeah, exactly. It just
Yeah.
mirrors natural structures more interestingly.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
what I've decided to do, so in the graph you have like multiple layers. So you have the word layer, you have the root layer. So what I'm adding now is a radical layer, which I thought would just be the 28 letters in the Arabic alphabet. But when I thought about it a little bit more, I found that it would actually be better if I didn't do just the 28, but if I made a distinction between each letter in each position. So there would be a difference, but basically like R1, R2, R3, R4, R5 values for every root. So, you could have an R1 value of Ra, because Ra here is in the first position, but then you might have another root where Ra is an R2 value. So the radical layer, yeah, the radical layer would have 28 times 3, basically. I mean, or depending on how many times each, approximately 184 or something like that, depending on how many times each letter is repeated in each position. So it'll be interesting to see like which letters are never found in like the middle position or the first position or something like that. So yeah, degrees of separation are an illusion. They're artifacts of perception, but they're very powerful and they're very beautiful. Yeah.
And they enable us to see patterns.
Yeah.
This discernment. So it's not, instead of using the word separation, if we use the word discernment, which is sometimes used for the translation of Furqan,
Right. Yeah.
it enables us to see the patterns of creation, patterns of actually admiring and loving Allah, right? Because they're so mind-blowingly beautiful that if you're open to it, you fall in love with Allah all over again.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so they bring you then from Furqan into the Quran, into the togetherness.
Yeah. Precisely. MashaAllah. It's yeah. It's. I mean, to me, it's really like the meaning of life, right? Is exploring the diversity and the separation and the distinctions and of life, while keeping in mind that it's that everything is connected, everything is the same, or not the same, but everything is part of the same. Everything comes from. It reminds me of the Bulleh Shah story, right? All the sounds, all the vibrations, all the frequencies come from they come from alif, come from the the singular source.
Yeah, and I think there is another verse of Bulleh Shah where he also actually connects it to the dot, not even just the alif, but just the dot, because
Yeah.
alif comes from a dot,
Right. Yeah.
right? And so people have said how the entire Quran is the elixir of all the holy books, and Surah Fatiha is the elixir of the whole Quran, and how Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is the extract of that surah, and the bay is the extract of that, and the dot beneath the bay is the extract of that, right? So the entire, all the holy books, all the words of Allah from all those 7 oceans and 7 times more of those oceans and all the trees of the world being pens. Allah's words never stop, and yet to have it be compacted, concealed, implicit in the dot is also like the a metaphor for the creation of the cosmos, right? From a singularity, from a dot. When he says he split the earth and the skies, the initial Big Bang, if we can call it that.
Yeah.
It comes from a splitting. It's a fission reaction out of nothing, out of nothingness, which is a point.
Right.
He's trying to tell. He tells us so much more than we are ever able to grasp.
SubhanAllah. Yeah. I'm remembering this quote that I've had on my Facebook profile for a long time. It's a quote from Pericles. I don't know how you say his name. It sounds Greek.
I think Pericles.
Yeah. So he said,
Paracelsus?
Paracelsus. I think that's how you say it. Yeah. So
The
he
alchemist?
said, I actually don't know anything about him. I just remember seeing this quote and it striking me. But he says, "He who knows nothing loves nothing. He who can do nothing understands nothing. He who understands nothing is worthless. But he who understands also loves, notices, sees. The more knowledge is inherent in a thing, the greater the love." And then this is the part that I just remembered. Anyone who imagines that all fruits ripen at the same time as strawberries knows nothing about grapes. So kind of. I don't know exactly what he's alluding to, but it popped into my head. Well, Jazakumullah khair, everyone. Any more thoughts, or are we going to stay in theme and cut short today?
Thank you, Omar, for hosting, and thank you guys for addressing the question I had about the Furqan and Quran. I really appreciate the discussion.
Oh, thank you for the questions. A beautiful thought and beautiful reminder. Jazakallah. Jazakallah khair.
This isn't even short. It's literally
Yeah, it's not that
3
short. Yeah,
hours long.
still 3 hours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
shorter than usual.
Well, an hour shorter, but khair inshallah. And I'll keep you guys all posted on developments. I know I'm behind on uploading a lot of stuff, so I'm gonna try and get as much of that done today as possible, inshallah. And Jazakumullah khair again for your participation and your perspectives.
Thank you all. Have a good day. See you.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you, everyone.
وإياكم وإياكم. السلام عليكم.
جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام.